Back in high school, Simone lived in the shadows of cruelty. She wasn't just teased, she was targeted. Every day was a battlefield of whispers and laughter that cut deeper than any blade. They mocked her face, twisted her name, and left scars. Words alone couldn't hide. Years passed, but scars don't just vanish. And when those same classmates planned a reunion years later, it wasn't out of kindness. No, this was their chance to put her on display again, to drag the ugly girl back into the spotlight for one more cruel show. The night finally arrived. Music pulsed through the hall, chatter buzzed like electricity, and in every corner people whispered, waiting for Simone, waiting to laugh. But when the doors opened, silence fell. Glasses slipped from hands, jaws dropped, and the air grew heavy. No one was ready for what they saw. Before I go on, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's dive in. High school corridors carry their own smell, cheap polish, sweat, and too much perfume. But for Simone, those hallways weren't just school grounds, they were war zones. Every step meant risk. Every corner could hold another insult. She wasn't simply another teenager. She was the target. They called her names. Ugly, monkey, anything to break her spirit. They mocked her lips, her hair, her dark skin. Lunch breaks were torture. She sat alone, tray untouched, pretending not to hear the snickers that always found her. Some didn't even bother whispering. "Don't sit too close," one boy shouted once. "Ugly might rub off." The cafeteria erupted in laughter. And Simone, she swallowed her tears with every bite, teaching herself to cry silently when no one was watching. Pain doesn't just sting, it plants roots. Every cruel word became soil for doubt. Lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, Simone wondered why she wasn't enough. Why beauty seemed to belong to everyone else. Why her own reflection felt like punishment. She learned to walk small, shoulders tucked tight, as if shrinking. It could make her invisible. Teachers turned a blind eye. Kids she tried to befriend backed away, afraid the teasing would spill onto them. She was left alone, unshielded, undefended. But even in that silence, something stirred. A fire, a flicker of defiance. She saw the same girls who mocked her spend hours caking makeup in the mirror, chasing validation like it was air. And deep down, a thought began to grow. If they think I'll stay broken, they don't know me at all. Still, at 17, that spark was fragile. School photos captured it. The forced smile, the lowered chin, the hollow eyes begging the camera to look away. The world saw an ugly girl. But inside, seeds of something stronger were already taking root. That's why, years later, when an invitation pinged into her inbox, Simone froze. High school reunion. 10 years gone, and suddenly they wanted her back. But she knew the truth. It wasn't about reconnecting. It wasn't about catching up. No, this was bait. They wanted to remind her of who she used to be, or at least who they thought she still was. The invitation looked innocent, but the truth beneath it was anything. But in the tiny, cluttered apartment on the edge of town, Melissa, the girl who once ruled the hallways as homecoming queen, stood before a cracked bathroom mirror. Her mascara smudged, her hair unwashed, her body heavier than she remembered from the glory days. A toddler wailed in the next room, and a half-empty wine bottle leaned dangerously against the sink. She sighed, typed into the reunion group chat, "You think she'll show?" Replies lit up instantly. "Ugly duckling? No way." Another message chimed in. "We should invite her for laughs." Then came the flood of laughing emojis. Meanwhile, Ryan, the so-called golden boy who everyone swore would be a millionaire, sat slouched in his parents' garage, Dusty boxes surrounded him, his failed startup logo peeling off the wall like a cruel reminder. He smirked at his phone as he typed, "Yeah, let's get her there. Imagine her face when she walks in. Dot." Their messages dripped with bitterness. They weren't successful, not really. Their lives had fallen short of the promises they once boasted about. But if they could mock someone else, if they could make Simone feel small again, it gave them oxygen. Misery, love's company, and cruelty was the glue keeping their fragile egos together. The plan grew legs. They rented a hall, money they didn't really have, and plastered social media with posts bragging about the spectacular event. But in hushed whispers, they confessed the truth to each other. This wasn't about reconnecting. This was about proving that someone else's life had turned out worse than their own. The night of the reunion arrived, thick with perfume, cheap cologne, and the syrupy sting of spiked punch. Old cliques reformed instantly. Former cheerleaders, now weary mums, huddled near the bar. Ex-athletes soft around the waist, slapped backs too hard, laughing too loud, pretending they were still kings. And everywhere, gossip. "Did you hear? She's really coming. No way. Swear it. I got confirmation." Smirk spread. Eyes rolled. Some leaned in with the hungry expression of people starving for someone else's humiliation. One woman, swirling her drink, whispered just loud enough, "Wonder if she still looks like, you know." Laughter bubbled around her like venom. Heads began to tilt toward the door, expectant, waiting for the awkward girl to stumble in so they could relive their cruelest jokes. They didn't realize the irony. They were about to measure Simone's life against their own shattered illusions, and she was walking toward them with a story none of them could imagine. The music thumped faintly in the background, one of those recycled playlists every reunion seemed to drag out, but it was drowned by the hum of chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the laughter that rolled like waves crashing on shore. Then it happened. The shift. A hush, not silence, just a ripple, the way a room quiets when instinct warns that something is about to change. Heads turned toward the double doors. They opened. At first, it was only the sound, heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Not stumbling, not timid, but steady, bold, deliberate, like a drumbeat, like a challenge. And then she stepped inside. For a moment, the room didn't recognize her. The chandelier's glow spilled across her bronze skin, turning what they once ridiculed into radiance. The silk emerald dress traced her figure with effortless grace, her hair cascading in perfect curls caught the light like spun gold. The same girl they once called ugly, but no one in that hall saw ugly now. What they saw was breathtaking, the kind of beauty that stops conversation mid-sentence. Whispers darted like sparks. "Wait, who's that? No way. Is that her?" Melissa's wine glass trembled in her hand. Ryan froze mid-laugh, his jaw locking like he'd bitten glass. At the back of the hall, classmates leaned forward, squinting, whispering with the nervous energy of people realizing a cruel joke had just turned on them. Simone didn't rush. Each step was measured, her clutch brushing against her hip, her chin raised, her eyes scanning not at them but through them. She carried herself like the room was already hers. And it wasn't just the beauty they saw. It was the aura, the unshakable confidence forged from years of scars that no one in that room could ever imagine surviving. By the time she reached the center, the silence was suffocating. Even the DJ froze, one hand hovering above the soundboard. In the corner, two men muttered, "She looks familiar." "Yeah, like I've seen her before. Ads, maybe." And then, like fire racing through dry grass, recognition spread. Eyes widened, fingers pointed discreetly. Whispers swelled into a buzz. One girl tugged her friend's sleeve, whispering urgently, "The cosmetics billboard. That's her, isn't it?" Her friend's jaw dropped. "Oh my God. It is her." Ryan rubbed his temple, muttering under his breath, trying to deny what his eyes were screaming. Melissa slouched lower, clutching her drink as though the glass might anchor her. And Simone. She stood calm, collected. She turned, sweeping her gaze across the same faces that once spat insults. Her smile was small, deliberate, the kind of smile that didn't ask for approval. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the room like velvet steel. "You don't recognize me," she began, pausing just long enough to make the silence ache. "Maybe you should. You gave me a name once. Ugly Monkey, remember?" The room shifted like a wave. Chairs creaked, throats cleared, eyes dropped to the floor. No one dared laugh. She let the silence breathe, then added, her voice calm but final. "This reunion you've been bragging about, the hall you're standing in, the food, the music, every detail was paid for by my company, sponsored by me. The ugly girl you laughed at is the face you've been seeing on billboards across this city." Gasps. A glass shattered sharp against the silence. Someone covered their mouth in shock. And Simone didn't gloat. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her presence was louder than revenge. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, tugging at her dress as if fabric could hide shame. Ryan stared at his drink, knuckles white. Others forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Masks cracked by envy and disbelief. Simone simply turned, thanked the waiter holding the door, and walked out with the same quiet power she entered with. No parting shots, no dramatic exit. Just triumph. Behind her, the whispers returned, heavy with regret. They had invited her to be the joke, but instead, they became the punchline. The girl they mocked had built an empire they could never touch. And that's the lesson. Sometimes justice doesn't come as revenge. Sometimes it walks into the room, stuns everyone silent, and leaves them choking on the memory forever. So if this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Hit that like button, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and subscribe for more powerful stories we'll bring to life.